So first, we're going to dig into burial rites and funeral practices first. We're going to cover a lot of things related to just the burial part. Then we will get into aspects that are related to reincarnation itself. So it's kind of a 1 and 2 part, but they're very much so joined together. So first and foremost, Ifa views death as just a natural passage. We're leaving this realm, the earthly realm, right? And we are transitioning into the astral realm, going to a room, right? And so that's hopefully we'll get directly to the ancestral realm. That's contingent on a lot of things that happen once a person does transition. So one of the things that's very, very important is those burial rites to ensure a peaceful transition, similar to what we were talking about in the previous live when we discussed those dynamics with hauntings and earthbound spirits and things of that nature. So burial rites in Ifa and pretty much all traditional or indigenous practices are there to ensure that when a person transitions, the land where they're going to be buried, the land period, but I don't mean the land specifically where they're being buried, but the land itself accepts them when they return, right? And also that the soul of that person is able to travel to the ancestral realm in a very peaceful way, right? An effective, efficient way as well, not in all kind of craziness and drama and trauma, stress, and so forth and so on, right? So what do proper burial rites look like in Ifa is one question that I did receive. Well, they include, number one, you're going to cleanse the body. You're going to make specific sacrifices and offerings that are designed for this particular aspect of our journey. Certain incantations are spoken over the individual to invoke the essence of spiritual energies. And then there are also very, very specific rites and ceremonies that are carried out in Yoruba land. I'm not going to get deep into those things, but this is the process. Now, there are absolutely some elements that look similar to what we do in the Western world, but the Western world is just purely, about getting the body out, getting the body together rather, so that the family friends can come and commune and sit with them during the repast observation if that's done, and then they're buried and there's a funeral and a ceremony from the perspective of really the people who are left behind, not for that deceased person, right? The rites and rituals in Yoruba land are primarily directed around the deceased. Now, definitely, we do have some additional things that we do for those who are left behind because they're grieving. And so there needs to be certain ceremonies and things that are carried out to ensure that they also are able to transition in their lives while they're still on the earth. I don't mean transition to the astral realm, but kind of just move forward with their life, right? Greetings, everybody who is coming in as well. So there are going to be some divination practices that go on just to determine specific steps for that unique individual. There are standardized practices that everybody's going to go through, but there may be certain readings done to see if certain things need to be done, additional things, or maybe certain sacrifices and things like that that need to be made when that person does go home. Okay, embalming. That's not a part of traditional Yoruba practices, right? It may be, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong or right or what have you, our Odessa, but it may be that some people do embalming, maybe kind of emulating the Western world, but that's not common, that's not traditional, that people are embalmed in Yoruba land. That's the reason why the burials happen so quickly. So a person is just, their physical body is cleaned up, then they're, wrapped in certain things and certain rituals and rites are done over them, and then they go into the ground. That's why it happens so fast, so that they're not around and they don't, linger. And obviously there's a smell and things like that that comes from a deceased body. That's why we embalm in the Western world. It's just to remove that pungency that smell or what have you. Greetings, and welcome all. What is the significance of Itutu, an Itutu ceremony? So the Itutu is part of the burial rites practices. It's basically a cooling ritual that calms down the spirit of the deceased. This is especially important when somebody dies suddenly and they're disoriented to where they are, right? Because that happens as well. And we don't, we want to prevent it for anybody, because even somebody who transitions peacefully, they can still be, they usually are probably disoriented to where they are at some level. Maybe not in the same way as somebody who, transitions all of a sudden and they weren't expecting it, right? So it prevents that person's spirit from just staying around, lingering as an earthbound spirit, being confused, being agitated, causing all kinds of problems for the living, as we talked about in the last live stream about the earthbound spirits and hauntings and things like that, because those are realities that happens, right? It also eases the grief for those who are living, establishes that kind of balance between the earthly and the ancestral realms. Because again, we definitely want to take care of the deceased to ensure that they are able to get to the next level of their journey in a proper way. But we also want to ensure that those who remain behind are taken care of in every way, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, etc. So, how long after death are burial rites and funeral ceremonies usually performed in Yoruba land? So, usually that happens right away, very, very quickly. Even so, it doesn't reach 24 hours in many cases. It can be about 6 hours from when somebody transitions to when they clean the person's body up and get them in the ground and people, gather around. It depends on the particular situation, the particular family, right? And then there are also certain situations where you're not going to have such a quick turnaround time, but that is typically the standard. Greetings, Renoverse. Thank you for joining us. Most burials are going to take place in that time frame, as I said before, without delay. Boom, straight to it. Right, do everything we got to do. Now, timing can be based off of that family situation, especially in nowadays, right, where you have people who are dispersed and everybody's not in the same locale as it used to be back in traditional times. So they may make some allowances for people to travel from one space to another in order to be able to attend to the ceremony and things of that nature. Get some closure there. Now, one really special caveat is going to be like people who die in their old age, really, elders of the community, things like that, priests and priestesses of the tradition, or individuals who are really, really high rank, right? Because there are then additional ceremonies and things like that for these individuals based on their status. So it can take days and even some cases weeks, especially when you're talking about like a high ranking person, because then you're talking about an entire community mourning, right? And those borders extend, especially, if you're in a community that, I should say a society rather, that a lot of people look up to that person or look to that person for guidance or stuff, things like that, right? Now, I just thought it interesting when I was doing this. I knew about like the Yoruba land belief systems and practices when it came to burial rites. And of course, I know what happens in the U.S., but I was like, let me kind of look this up and see what's typical, right? I should say, when I say the U.S., I should say like what goes on in my family in the region where I'm from, right? But I was like, I'm curious to know is that, is that common for everyone? So anyway, just to give you guys some quick pointers here, like fun to know facts or what have you. So in the US and Canada, funerals are usually held within 3 to 14 days. That's the standard, according to the research that I did. And then in the UK, about 1 to 2 weeks after death. So this was very interesting to me. And again, we know why these things transpire, especially in the Western world when you're talking about insurance policies and inheritances, and even so debt collection and so forth and so on. So there could be a whole lot of things that go on after the fact when somebody transitions. I've seen it before where somebody buried their loved one like 3 months after because there was so much dispute about this particular individual. And I was shocked. I was like, whew, how do you keep somebody's body out for 3 months while you guys are arguing over things? Like, really? No. Let's see. Greetings, Samantha. Thank you for joining us as well. So another question that I received beforehand is, how do burial rites connect to ancestor elevation? Which is a good question, very important question. So this is part of even so ancestor elevation. When we bury them properly, we're ensuring that they have a good transition and that they can elevate and go straight to the ancestral realm without any delays, problems, confusion, things like that. So this is why you want to take care of all of those different dynamics when somebody transitions, especially like the offerings and things like that. You can even start preparing beforehand. I talked to you guys about that before. Like, you can start to prepare a person to transition well before they even leave the earth, for them to elevate and ensuring that the land accepts their soul or what have you in their body, and then goes straight up to where they need to be. Blooming and beautiful, you said you're reminded of James Brown and his estate. It took a while for him. I don't recall him specifically. I remember Sherman Hemsley though. Like, there was a lot of confusion around his death, and I think it took some months and things like that. Sherman Hemsley, referring to George Jefferson. If you guys know who that is, you recall him, George Jefferson from the Jeffersons, right? Also from Amen, for people who may have not come up in that era. He did those were the two sitcoms he was known most for. He did a lot of work, but I do remember it being a lot of trauma around his death as well. James Brown, I'm not aware of, and I actually knew who James Brown was, like, in person. My uncle was friends with James Brown. There's a lot of drama in his life holistically, right? Even before he transitioned. But I love James Brown, so it's no shade on him. He was definitely the godfather. So it took months to bury Sherman. Yes, it did. I remember it being like a crazy story. I have to go back to that. But yeah, it was some craziness going on there behind his death. Now, let me quickly talk about like the status and initiation differences when it comes to burial as well in Yoruba land. So burial rites different, definitely according to a person's status when they transition, as I said before, even so their age, and of course some elay or house temple, if you will, lineage practices. So they can vary throughout, even though it's Ifa, every temple has their own way of doing things. Distinctions are made in those rites for elders, children, community leaders, initiated people in the tradition. So children are often buried with very simple rites and rituals that recognize their shortened journey. They are not celebrated in the same way as adults who transition, who have lived a full life, but we just basically honor them and put them in the ground quickly. But this was an untimely passage, so it's not seen as a celebration or a commemoration in the same way as somebody who was able to live out their life and things of that nature. Can uninitiated individuals receive proper burial rites through the Ifa tradition? Absolutely. They can receive them. They can still go through certain protocols. However, their ceremonies are not going to be as elaborate for the most part as initiated people who were initiated into the tradition. So, or even I should say devotees as well, because I received this question and I kind of took it as initiated versus uninitiated. But now that I'm talking about it, I think also maybe somebody could be asking about somebody who's not even practicing, right? So maybe you're practicing but your family member is not practicing. So, you can still take them through the same rites of the tradition if that's what you want to do. Um, I would say respect their wishes in that case. So, you have to think about that dynamic too. Some people are like staunch Christians and they don't want anything to do with traditional African belief systems. So you kind of have to temper that with that reality as well. Like I take care of my people whenever they transition, but I also respect that they may not want, a full blown, African type of ceremony. They don't, not may not, they don't. But I would still do the rites and rituals because I need for them to transition well because I don't want them bothering me at all. So I go ahead and get that done for them. Now, there's both, the family, the familiar responsibility and the community responsibility when it comes to these dynamics. So from the family, they provide that direct care, the resources that are necessary to get everything done, any type of commemoration events from their end. So, absolutely there are times where you're going to eat and celebrate, especially when it's somebody major in the community. Celebrate from the perspective of somebody who lived a full life. You celebrate their life. As I said before, you don't do that with young children. Usually you're not going to have any type of festivities in those events. The community upholds collective rituals, ceremonies. They're going to come around and they're going to support. And, each community, again, has their own way of doing things and their own way of being when it comes to these dynamics. So, some communities, they may have it where the person is taken care of, the family rather, is taken care of thereafter by the community, depending on certain aspects of it. I won't say the whole family, but let's say, for instance, it's a widow, right? And so other people will come around and continuously take care of that individual in different ways after they transition, so forth and so on. Alrighty, so I was also asked, what if burial rites are not performed correctly in Ifa? So if they're neglected or they're not done properly, that person may absolutely continue to linger. They may struggle to transition. They become an earthbound spirit for a while. Even when they start to transition in the ancestral realm, they may not be well situated. So when you try to call on them or work with them, they're not close to you. So you got to still do those rituals at some point to ensure that those spirits are close to you. The family or the community, as I said before, they can have ongoing spiritual or generational disturbances if that individual is not properly cared for. So this is like just a no-brainer. It just happens in Yoruba land, right? Unlike in the Western world, I would say especially in the US, like there's just not a commonality to go through all of the ritualistic dynamics as far as sacrifices and offerings or any other special ritual that you may need to do for that individual. Instead, it's just it's an event, it's a ceremony, right? Versus a full-fledged like ritualistic practice in the Western world. Now we're going to transition to reincarnation beliefs. So after somebody transitions, what happens to them at that particular point? So in Ifa, we definitely believe in the notion of reincarnation. It can be described as a tumwa or a tumbi, which expresses the fact that somebody, or I should say the notion, right, depending on your connotation, but it expresses the notion of the return or the rebirth of a soul, the return of the ancestors, right? So it's generally in Yoruba society distinguished as human to human reincarnation, not like you go and you come back and you're reincarnated as something different. You could be reincarnated as an insect, for instance, or a flea or a cow or whatever it may be based on how you live. Instead, it's interpreted as you reincarnate, and for the most part, as a human, and for the most part, you are reincarnating back into your lineage. You are not reincarnating just all willy-nilly anywhere. There are certain circumstances where a person may need to reincarnate outside of that, family line whenever necessary, but this is a rarity. That's not what's commonly thought of when a person returns, because it's the notion that the ancestors return, somebody from your lineage. And we say ancestors, we're talking about our direct birth line. Of course, we have the notion of collective ancestors, but we're not talking about that particular line. We're talking about the lineage that you came from, right? So another question that I received beforehand is, how is the timing of reincarnation determined in Ifa? Which is a good question. So reincarnation, it doesn't really follow a fixed or a predictable pattern or timeline. It just really depends on that person's soul and their state and where they were in alignment with their destiny, right? So if they were in the process of fulfilling their destiny, like purposely, intentionally, and they were moving in accordance with their destiny, they probably will be cut some slack before they come right back in. But if they had some things, well, it just depends. I'm not even going to say that part. It really just depends on that person, because there may be some things that they have to take care of in a room before they even come back as an ancestor. But I mean, before they come back to the earth or what have you. So it really just depends on where they were. Some people, absolutely, they come back really quickly, all right, while others remain in the ancestral realm for generations before they come back to the physical world, right? They have to also, like I said before, complete certain obligations in the ancestral realm. So, maybe they were in the course of completing their destiny, or there was some things that they need to learn, some knowledge that they need to gain before they came back, or they just weren't needed back on the earth at that particular time. So it really just depends on that particular individual's path that they're meant to take. Another question was, is there a particular order based on one's unfinished or incomplete destiny in their lineage? All right. So usually it's going to follow a purposeful order within their family line. So they're basically going to return based on when they are needed. So it could be some unfinished business or things in their lineage that needs to be done. And that person, because they have certain knowledge, because they have certain tools and resources to be able to do it most efficiently or effectively, they may be sent in order to get that done. So it just depends. Okay, so you're asking a question about Egbe and ancestors. Do you dwell with Egbe before you come back home? Absolutely. So your ancestors are absolutely part of your Egbe group. Your Egbe is a society of different forces, your Orishas, your ancestors, and other spiritual forces collectively. So you would absolutely dwell with them. Egbe always, well, I won't say always, but oftentimes they desire you to be back there, right? Especially if you had a big role, a leadership role or something like that within your Igbe community. So this is why they like to stir up trouble sometimes, right? Another question here that I received is, do evil, mean-spirited people reincarnate? Which is a good question. So at the end of the day, everybody has the potential to come back into the earth, regardless of how they lived in a previous lifetime, right? Even so, a person who was mean-spirited will most likely come back more so than somebody else who lived a good life and was in alignment with their destiny, because their person needs to come back and make amends sometimes for the things that they did, or they have to learn certain lessons so that they can continue to elevate in their journey. So absolutely, they're gonna come back. They got to do it again. They got to figure it out, right? He says, every member of your bloodline on both sides also parts of your. No, not at all. That is not true. You may not have any members in your family that is part of your Igbe. And the question was for people who can't see it, is every member of your bloodline on both sides also part of your Igbe group? Because I think I read that really fast. So the answer to that would be no. Right? Because you can have people in your family right now that like in your immediate family, like it could be, for instance, 4 people in a household and they could all 4 belong to a different Igbe group. Because one, you got to remember that you're made up from 2 different sides, right? So you might have one side of the family may be connected closer to one particular Igbe group and another side connected closer to another group. Even so, there will be, I'm actually going to say your mother and your father, right? And it could be that you are from the same Igbe group, but let's say, for instance, your mother and your father, they're from 2 separate Igbe groups. Then you may be from one of the same groups that they're from, but you may be from a different Igbe group. So it really just depends, right? Okay, so you're saying, is there any hell-like realm for them? Absolutely. So when they remain in a space of torture, like when they're earthbound and they can't ascend to get to that next level, that's a space of hell for them. Hell in that it is not, they're not well positioned. Not hell in the sense that they're burning up for all eternity, because that doesn't even make any sense anyway. But it is not from their particular perspective. You're asking, does the soul have a choice in reincarnation, or could they decide to stay in the ancestral realm? No, I don't think that they have a choice, right? Because it's, your reincarnation patterns are all about what you need to learn in order to grow and elevate. I can say you would have a choice from the perspective of how you live while you're on the earth, right? So if you walk a path to where you are trying to align with your destiny and you're getting all those lessons and you're integrating them, you will likely go to the ancestral realm and be able to stay there permanently, if that's the question you're asking. But it's not like you go back to a room and you just say, I don't want to come back to earth, right? And that's it. Like, no. You don't have that type of choice in the decision, if that's the question. So you're asking, so is it possible that you may never see some of your ancestors ever again? That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. So I will just, if you could answer, that's a really good question that she's asking. If there is a possibility, I don't know if it's a male or female, so forgive me. I thought I was looking at a different name. But the question is there a possibility you may never see some of your ancestors again, right? If he's there, hopefully we'll get it out. If not, I might be able to get it on YouTube in the comments. Can Ifa tell if I have Igbo or Benin ancestors? Yes, but not in that way. It's not that you just, well, yeah, actually, you did ask it the right way. So you would ask it that way. Yes. So you can ask Ifa, do I have Igbo or Benin ancestors? Versus saying, where is my ancestral lineage from? So Ifa is not going to answer it in that way to just come and give you all like a DNA test, right? That's not how it works. But you could come to Ifa and present different tribal groups and say, am I from XYZ groups, and if I could say yay or nay to that. Absolutely. SSCCO, sorry about that. You are male. I apologize. Okay, so getting back to it, does the spirit need to be spiritually elevated by a family member to be reincarnated? So you can reincarnate it without being elevated through your ancestors, through your lineage or what have you, your descendants. But elevation helps out a whole lot. If you don't have those elevation rites and rituals performed, it could take much longer time. You could remain earthbound for a while, struggle, go through different problems and things like that. That's why ancestors are so very important in the tradition, that we take care of them, and we remember them, because if you don't, they could have such a hard time. And they can still eventually make it, but again, it's going to be a much longer road if you don't assist in that process. And when you do the elevation rites, you actually help them to refine and make their passage much easier when they do return to the earth. Okay? Have you heard of our ancestors doing human sacrifice? What do you mean by our ancestors? Are you saying people of African descent holistically, or are you saying Yoruba specifically? So let's see. Yeah, so it depends on what you mean by that, as far as either one. According in Ifa, human sacrifice is not acceptable. I'm not going to say people don't do it, because some people do operate on that level, but this is not part of traditional protocol or practice, if that's the question, right? There's just nothing in the old dude that tells somebody go and sacrifice a human. But the same principles and knowledge set that's used in doing animal sacrifices can be applied to human sacrifices, but that is not considered to be Ifa practice. I hope you understand what I meant by that. Aside you're saying in traditional Yoruba society, are there any instances that, due to the surrounding circumstances of death, a burial ceremony may not be conducted? Yes, absolutely. So when you're saying a burial ceremony, are you referring to the burial rites and rituals? Because burial rites and rituals should always be performed, right? Even especially so in cases of violent deaths or difficult deaths and things like that. Now, would the burial, the ceremony, if you're referring to ceremony in the sense like we have funerals here, most likely not. They would not be celebrated, right? But you still want to do your due diligence to carry out rites and rituals for somebody who, for anybody really, that transitions in your family line, because you want to make that easier for them, right? So I got a lot of questions over here. You're saying, what about suicide, rapists, serial killers, and so forth and so on? Yeah, you still want to do that. They need elevation more so than the people who lived good lives. So you definitely want to help them to elevate and grow and get to their next level, right? So yeah, you do want to help them. Now, does that mean it is good or okay to live in that condition? Absolutely not, because they're probably going to deal with a whole lot of things once they return, because again, they got lessons to learn and they got things that they have to go through. Okay. So let's see. I did get a question about divination. Like, can Ifa divination determine if a person has reincarnated? Not in the sense that you're going to go and just ask Ifa, am I reincarnated or what have you. The reality is, the whole thought pattern behind you being here on earth is that you are incarnated from the heavenly realm. Now, if the question is this my first incarnation on the earth versus was I on the earth before and then I came back into the earth, that's not like a question that you're going to just ask, but like in general, we're just thinking of most people as being reincarnated. Now, that being said, Ifa can reveal whether a person carries the energy or the essence of a returned ancestor. So there are certain odu that indicate that a person is an ancestor return, showing that their destiny is tied to some type of unfinished business that they need to take care of, right? But it's not like a question that you just go and say, am I reincarnated? That would be revealed through an Ifa reading, or even so through like Ifa initiation, the whole process itself, depending on the individual. Okay. how would one help foul types of what type of foul spirit to elevate, like a murder, thief, rapist? How would one elevate them? Is it the same sense of elevating good more? Okay, yes, absolutely. It's the same process, the general process. There may be certain things that need to be done for those particular souls if they've done like some really foul things, right, in their life. But the basic premise of rites and rituals for the deceased exists regardless of how you lived in this lifetime. We still want to do the work. We want to do the work even more so, like I said. And I know it's probably difficult for people to, like, think about it, especially coming from a Christian background where you're told that you're going to just burn for all eternity in hell and you're going to just be punished or what have you. No, there is a space of redemption in Ifa. That doesn't mean that you just do anything, though, because that doesn't mean that your life is going to be good if you just decide you want to go and live in every type of way. You're probably going to experience a whole lot of repercussions from that while you're on the earth, but you will probably definitely experience it even more so when you return. So let's say, for instance, and I've seen this like a lot, where maybe somebody was like a rapist before, right, in their life, and then that lineage suffers a lot from people being raped within their family line. You see a lot of these patterns of people who go through things like this. So, let's say you walk around, you murder a lot of people, then a lot of the family line may end up dying really, really quickly or suffering from some type of illness or what have you. And so you probably will get caught up in that mix when you return back to the earth until somebody takes care of that and they cut that off. They cut those cycles off. Okay. So let's see. I see your question about astral projection, but I don't want to get into that in this episode, right? And I do want to do an episode of that about that, because I've been asked a similar question about like parallel universes and things like that, and that'll be a completely different episode. So you said it takes just a long walk, Oh, you said it takes just as long to walk out of the forest as it does to walk in. Don't know what that is reference to. So yeah, you want to elevate. You want to elevate. You're saying that's if that soul wasn't elevated right. I don't know what the question is in reference to. You could explain that part to me. Okay. So going back to the questions at hand, how many times do we reincarnate in total? So there's no specific time for anybody. Like, it's not like, okay, you come back on this earth 16 times and that's it, right? You're going to continue your journey until you fulfill your destiny. You're going to come back and forth until you fulfill your destiny. This is why you want to do what you got to do while you are here, all right? When that process finally ends, the soul no longer needs to reincarnate. They remain among the elevated ancestors permanently in that case. So they'll just stay in that space and continue to help out. They still have a purpose. They still have a position. You still want to, help other people out, but, you become a leader or an elder in the ancestral community. So you can help out people much better from your lineage that way. Okay, so you said you're asking this if the soul wasn't elevated, right? So not just if they weren't elevated. That's important, because once their soul is elevated, then they know more. They can help out the family line better. And when they return, hopefully they can make better decisions. But it can still happen if nobody in their family line breaks that continual cycle, right? Now you can affect change in your individual life. So if you already know, like, I got a family full of murderers or drunks or whatever it may be, you can work out your own destiny path. You're not relegated to suffering just because this is what your family went through. You can make those determined decisions and, work with Ifa through divination and other practices to elevate your own soul and experience while you're here on this earth. So yeah, let's see. You said you're having connection issues. Yes, SSC, I did respond. I'm not answering that here because it is not part of the topic. I'm trying to stay on topic because I get inundated with a lot of questions, but I will look at that. I think I want to do an episode on that, and another time we'll flesh that particular question out. Olodumare, will Olodumare judge me? Judge my actions in the earth, like what I do in the earth. That was the question, one question that I received beforehand, right? I mean, and I might be mispronouncing it, right? For you people who love to correct my Yoruba pronunciations, but we're talking about, in the earth here. Ifa teaches that Olodumare does not judge, not in the same way like the human judges. You're going to hell and you're horrible and so forth and so on. I mean, will you, experience a position where you will deal with some negative aspects? Absolutely, because you perpetrated negative aspects. So the energy is going to come around back to you in some form or way if you don't correct it. There are ways to, correct it. And when I say correct it, it's not repent full on, like in the sense of a Christian perspective, just saying, hey, I'm sorry and I'm not going to do it anymore, right? It's way more than just saying it. But it is similar in the sense that you will do whatever rites and rituals are necessary to appease the forces to release you from that energy, and then you don't do it again, right? Because repentance, even so in Christianity, comes with the notion of, asking for forgiveness and not repeating the same thing over and over again. So each person, your Ori is going to hold a record of your choices, your actions while you are here. Whenever you transition, right, you're going to be brought a record for from your Ori, your higher self, right? So there are different aspects of Ori for people who are unfamiliar with that. So you have your physical head, right? And you also have your inner head, that's your consciousness. And you also have your higher self, that's your spiritual double that resides in a room while you're here. So when you transition back to a room, your higher self is then going to, hold a conference with you, so to speak, and say, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong, so forth and so on, and evaluate your experiences. And then that's going to help determine, whether you need to come back here. And if you need to come back here, what is your destiny going to look like at that point when you come back to the earth? Okay, so destiny, Ori, and the cycle of life we're going to talk about real quickly. Alrighty, so how does one's behavior in a past life affect their present life according to Ifa? It's another question I got. So as I said before, the choices, the actions that you take in this life or even a previous life, if you are reincarnated, influences the blessings, the challenges that you have. You come back with a certain set of knowledge, right? Whenever you come back, you just know things innately, right? That's why you see babies doing things that just, seem uncanny sometimes, young kids, because they're actually coming back with the knowledge and the understanding that they had before they left. And especially depending on how close they come back. If somebody is reincarnated right after they leave, they're going to come back with a strong connection to the knowledge that they previously had. It actually reminds me of, I don't know, it was a YouTube video or something I was watching where it was this young girl in India. She was very young, and she would tell her family like that she was married and that she had like the children, the life that she had. She would call her husband's name. She knew it, and she told him where she was from and everything. And so they went to that village where she was, supposedly from, and they met up with the man, and his wife had been deceased for a little while. I can't remember how long, maybe just a couple of years or so. And they asked him about her and all of these different things, the wife's name, so forth and so on. And he confirmed like everything this little girl was saying was true. and they just thought she was just the reincarnation of that woman, but she had a strong memory, a strong connection to the earthly realm, to her previous life. Now, if it's true or not, because I don't believe everything that I hear in social media, but that's a great example of somebody having that same connection back to this life, right? Let's see. Let's see. The challenges, the lessons in this life also align with areas where your destiny is needed. So you're going to come back with those blessings, with that knowledge, with the strength, with the power, right? That's why you see people are naturally inclined towards certain things, even at certain age, at young ages. The sad part about it is, in the Western world, we are kind of relegated to, you know, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to go this direction, so forth and so on. You should do this, etc., etc. So, what was I about to say? So we kind of get away from our destiny because we don't understand it from that perspective. But we should stay connected to it. If we do, we can just do things so much more effectively and efficiently as we go about. But we also have those same challenges, similar to what I was talking about before. So if you did a lot of foul, corrupt things in your previous life, when you transition, you will likely, when you reincarnate, I should say, you are likely going to experience the consequences of those actions as well and have some trying times in life. So you got to think about that as a reality as well. So I got a few questions over here on IG. You asked about the relationships between Oya, Eshu, the ancestors, right? So ancestor, Oya, she guards the ancestral room. She's closely connected to the element of the ancestors, and she helps out. She works with them closely because she's all about death and transition. So she actually helps them with their particular process when it comes to transitioning. Eshu is a communicator. So Eshu is going to bring forth communication from the heavenly to the earthly realm. So Eshu is going to help us to communicate with the ancestors, just as Eshu helps us communicate with any Orisha, because the ancestors are considered Orishas as well, according to the Ifa tradition, right? This is from your direct bloodline. They're not Orishas in the sense that they govern everybody in different attributes of nature or what have you, but they are Orishas in the sense that they are elemental forces that help us out in our day-to-day life. Okay, you're asking what's the relationship between Oya, the winds, and death. Okay, so I answered the part about Oya and death. So the wind is about movement. Wind is communication as well. So that's a communicative force, and likewise, Oya brings really quick change through the winds, right? Changes of wind. She's just like, let's get some stuff done. That's what we see, the hurricanes and things like that coming to pass. So she clears paths with that. And that's a form of destruction. It's a form of death, a form of transition, right? So that's her role, is to remove things that are no longer serving us, so that then a clear passage can be made for the things that we need to come and live. She has to remove things that are not productive. And she does that sometimes suddenly. Okay, so let's see, we already talked about that part. So whenever somebody receives their destiny in youth, which is so ideal, right? Then they're able to better navigate their life on the earth, especially if they're in a society that supports that understands that everybody has their own unique pathway, and their community is going to support them in fulfilling that path, their life path, versus, like I was saying before, in a Western society where we are taught, you should go for this particular career, or your parents even so may be like, I want you to be this, and they, teach you from a young age, this is the direction they want you to go in, without any regard for where you're meant to be, what you're meant to be doing in this lifetime. It's not even just from a career or occupational perspective, but just overall, like, what are you meant to do and what are you meant to be? But if you get that information early in life, you can make better decisions. That's not to say that everybody who gets, has an understanding of their destiny from birth is going to walk in it as they should, because there are other factors that, for one, it's up to them once they get to a certain level. Then likewise, that's going to be impacted by their family, how well their family helps them to navigate that destiny as they walk along as well. I mean, in traditional Yoruba society, that wasn't a thing. That was just like expected. It was normal. Nowadays, times have changed so much. Yes. Winds represent destruction. Absolutely. A hurricane. What does a hurricane do? It tears stuff down, mate. Not just destruction, like like fire, right? So we look at Ogun energy. That's fire energy. It tears stuff down. And it just kills it and it's finished. It transmutes it. It turns it into ash. Well, wind destroys things, but it leaves chaos in its path, because when everything is destroyed after a hurricane, usually it's displaced and it's all over in different parts of the place. Literally, like a car could be picked up at one part of a city and dropped off in a whole nother city. After the hurricane wind is finished, it displaces it. So it's absolutely destructive, but not only destructive, it's chaotic in its destruction, if you understand that. You said you were talking about it today. Yes. And it's very important, I think, for us to understand like the different areas in which the orishas operate within, because some orishas are destructive, but it's in different ways, like we were just talking about. Like, yeah, it's like it brings a chaotic destruction. When she's around, Ogun just gonna burn stuff up, finish, over with, done. Right, there's nothing left. And so this is why too you really want to honor Ogun from that perspective, because when that warrior starts to fight, it can kill stuff, literally. Like, people can die when they're dealing with the wake of that energy in a wrongful way. So yeah. Let's see. Can someone break free from cycles of reincarnation? So you guys asked that earlier, which is you can only break away really once you completed that process. That's it. You can't just say I'm done on your own. You have to complete your destiny process, right? And once you complete that, you get elevated to that ancestor status permanently, and you're good to go, right? Is reincarnation considered a blessing or a burden in Ifa, right? So it's not a burden. It definitely can be looked at as a blessing, but it is also a high level of responsibility. Because remember, when you're coming back to learn lessons and make amends sometimes. And it's not always even so that you did something wrong. Like, some people's lessons are tied to them, like not even allowing other people to take advantage of them, right? They don't even know how to do that in this lifetime. So they have to go through lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson to learn something like that. For the most part, they wouldn't be considered a bad person, but there's something that they need to get strength in. And if they never learn it, they never learn how to say no to people. If they never learn how to allow people to stop taking advantage of them, then they're going to have to come back here and do that again and figure it out, right? You're asking, are there levels to a rune? If so, can you explain them? There are, but I don't want to explain them here because I'd rather have the proper terminology when I do so. It offers the soul repeated opportunities to fulfill its destiny, right? So that's the blessing part of it, when you get to come back. So even if you were a horrible person, I'm gonna step back too from that word, because a lot of times we think about it like in black and white terms, like you either all this or you're all that. There are some people who are murderers, who are rapists, and all those things that we talked about before, who still were good people in some aspect. They may have done like some really horrible, atrocious things in their life, but they could have also done some amazing, wonderful things in life. right? So you get to come back and reconcile those types of things that you've done in the past. That's what I mean by that. So because nobody's all good, nobody's all bad. Because even the person, like somebody may have not done those horrible things, but they could be a very selfish person to where they help no one else out, and everything that they do is for their own benefit or good. That's not a good person, right? But we don't see it in the same way in society because that person isn't maybe out there robbing people or hurting people in the way that we look at it from somebody who may especially be in prison for the things that they've done. So I hope y'all understand the difference there. So this is the last section. We're going to talk about walking the path of E5 before I close out. So please go ahead and put any questions or comments that you have, and we'll get those taken care of. So number one, recognizing that E5 views death as a natural passage absolutely helps us to understand that we came here for a greater purpose and we need to walk in greater awareness. If you don't want to come back, I personally don't. So if you don't want to come back, try your best to learn the lessons and get it in, right? And try your best to walk your destined path. That's what I plan on doing. I'm not saying that I won't come back, but it's just not my desire or goal. So I'm trying my best to get it in this time around, right? Understand that burial rites, reincarnation, they remind us that we walk with our ancestors all of the time, guys. And this is why we need to constantly do things to serve them so that they can serve us. They're able to tell us those mistakes that they made and show us, like, don't go down this path because this wasn't good for us. This wasn't good for our lineage. So, or even you as an individual, they are here to help you to even fight on your behalf in the ancestral realm, in the cosmic realm, brother. And so you yourself want to walk with them so that you can live a better life. Okay. Ifa teaches us that our choices in this lifetime definitely have that ripple effect for future incarnations. So do what you got to do. Don't look at it as something that you fear. Like, I don't fear return. I just don't prefer to return in the way the earth is made up now. Like, if we could go back, like maybe if I return in times are similar to the way they were in the ancestral times, where in a space where I would like to live, I would love that. Absolutely. Time where life was more balanced, not perfect, but more balanced and harmonious. And, you had clean foods and people cooperated and operated together as a community. Oh, yeah. I would love coming back. And, maybe by the time it's for me to come back, I can come back to that reality. But to come back into this reality, no, it's not something that I would enjoy. Definitely, guys, check us out on the Asanee 44 website if you want to know more about the services that we offer, authentic divination, explore our resources, so much literature there. So now I'm going to get a few of these questions out that you guys are presenting on IG before I close up. Let's see. You said you like Ifa, but voodoo calls you. Could be that you got lineage in voodoo that you need to go and you need to deal with them because that happens. Ifa isn't for everybody. You got to remember, Ifa came from a specific people group, a Yoruba people group. I love it myself, but with the understanding that there are so many traditions out there where the same dynamics take place in as they do in Ifa, they just take place according to that culture's way of being and doing things. Right, so you probably have lineage that came from the voodoo culture. You said, can you be born with two ovaries? This is a good question. And I've heard that is a possibility. I've seen, I read it somewhere before. I don't know, but I've heard that people may have multiple ovaries. And when I read about that, it made me think about somebody like with multiple personality disorder or something like that. Not sure. I don't know if our Odessa is here because he didn't respond before. Network may have been out. But if you are our Odessa, can you let us know the answer to that? Can a person be born with two ovaries? Oh, you're very, very welcome. Brown Sugar 6. So next week, not next week, the next live stream, I want to talk about sexual taboos in Ifa because I get a lot of questions from you guys about different aspects. For some reason, the question about masturbation comes up a lot. So we're going to dig into that. It's not an episode to have your children around, but I'll give that disclaimer whenever we get to it. So that's all I have for today, guys. Thank you all for showing up. As always, Ashe, please have a very blessed and beautiful day. So you're saying when will it be? 2 weeks from now, so the 20th, October the 20th. That's when I plan to have it. Okay. You saying you're wondering if SU had multiple Ori since he wears so many hats. I mean, the reality of it is that all Orishes have different aspects of them. I wouldn't think of it as different Oris, but maybe so as like I just look at it as a spectrum, right? A continuum of that particular force. And even going back to the question about multiple Oris, it could even so be like maybe a person's like Orisha energy presenting, right? Because it's like you're said to have like one head Orisha in Isheshe, like a one spirit that resonates the most with you. But there may be other spirits that are like really close to you as well. And so maybe because the person doesn't know how to navigate those energies really, really well, it can manifest as them seeming like they have more than one Ori, or even so what they call multiple personality disorder or something like that. Yes. Absolutely. Oh, yes, I said the next time REM will be on October the 20th. That's the plan. October the 20th, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's the next time I plan on coming back to do the live stream. So I hope to see you all, you guys then, excuse me. I hope to see you all then. As always, okay, one more question. Different aspects of the same essence. Since it's multidimensional being is more than one thing, guess it was humanizing the concept. Yeah, and I think we all do that. Even me, because it's easy to put it in a perspective that you understand, right? But it's really just different manifestations of that energy's essence, right? Just like Oshun, everybody, the love, the romance, that's what they want. But Oshun also manifests as a force of jealousy and envy. That's when you get to the opposite end of her energy, right? And the goal is always to manifest in that balanced space. You're very, very welcome. You be safe likewise, REM. Okay, so blessings to you all. So I'm gonna close up for real this time. All right. I say have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond, guys.